Hey, hope you guys enjoyed that short moody cinematic of me making a pour over coffee. It was all shot with the Fujifilm X-S10. I mostly do videos and tutorials related to camera settings for photography. However, today we will be focusing on the Fujifilm X-S10 and my settings for video work because, surprise, it's kind of a requirement if you want to do YouTube. So we'll start off by covering the settings that I use for video that I feel are the most relevant. Keep in mind I am not an advanced video shooter. I like to think of myself as more of an advanced beginner. And then I'll do a quick demonstration of my process when it comes to shooting a generic scene. This won't be a complete beginner's guide. You would have to at least have some knowledge of video jargon and whatnot. With that out of the way, let's begin. Okay, so I'll only be covering certain settings, and keep in mind, these settings are my preferences. Yours may or may not differ, and that's okay. I like to keep shooting mode on manual because I like full control over the shutter, aperture, and ISO. Bear in mind though, this manual shooting mode does not mean manual focus. There are other options, of course, and we'll take a look at that in the demonstration later. Movie mode I have set to 4K 16:9, 24 frames per second at 200 megabits per second. I like to shoot in 4K whenever possible and at the highest bitrate. The aspect ratio I keep at 16:9 because that's the standard for YouTube, and 24 frames per second because I like that cinematic frame rate. I sometimes shoot 30 frames per second too. That's always an option. File format I leave on the first one for the highest video and audio quality. You could use the second option, but I just want to ensure I get the best possible footage from the camera. Fixed movie crop magnification I have off. If you set it to on, every footage will be digitally cropped in 1.29 times to keep the focal length consistent. It doesn't matter for me, so we're moving on. F-log recording is off at the moment, but I usually do have it on. F-log will increase the dynamic range of your video, raising the minimum ISO to 640, and will give you a very washed out and flat color profile. However, this flat look allows for more flexibility when it comes to grading the video yourself in a video editing software. If you don't want to spend time editing colors, then simply keeping it off and shooting with a Fujifilm recipe will work just as good. 4K and Full HD movie output, you just need to make sure that 4K and Full HD are showing up next to their respective SD card icon. If not, it won't let you record. Photometry I have set to multi. IS mode I usually have set to IBIS and OIS. Keep in mind if you have a lens attached that has OIS, by turning it off from the lens, it also means you also turn off the IBIS in the X-S10 and vice versa. If you have a lens without OIS, there will be an option to turn the IBIS off from the IS mode setting. I don't use digital image stabilization, nor do I use IS mode boost. Personally, I've never tested these features extensively, but in real world handheld use, I haven't seen much difference. ISO is on auto at the moment, but sometimes I have it set to a certain value if I am shooting in a controlled lighting environment. I'd skip IQ because it's basically film simulations and works basically the same as it would in photography. I have a few videos about Fujifilm film simulations on my channel you can check out. Under AF/MF, not too much to say. Focus mode is where you would change how you like to focus. This is the place to set manual focusing if you choose to do so. AF mode, I have it set to area. If you have it on multi, you are basically telling the camera to decide where in the frame it should focus on. Sometimes it works, but most of the time you will be disappointed. Face eye detection I have set on if I am doing talking head videos for extra insurance, because Fuji autofocus can be a bit sloppy sometimes. Now, microphones. This will only apply if you record with an external microphone, so if you don't own one, you can just skip this and use the camera's default settings. Internal mic levels are turned off because I don't want the camera's built-in mic to pick up anything while my external mic is going. External mic levels, however, since I own a Rode VideoMic NTG, I find that turning the volume way down in the settings allows me to be more flexible with the audio tuning on the mic itself. Mic jack setting, make sure it is set to mic. Mic remote release, have it set to mic because obvious reasons. So now we have the settings out of the way, let me demonstrate how I would go about setting up a scene and just the process behind shooting video on the X-S10. For the demonstration, I will need a good light source. I will be using the Weeylite Ninja 200 from Viltrox. Viltrox sent me this light along with a bunch of add-on accessories. Full disclosure, no money was exchanged, and everything I say will be my honest thoughts. It's a 60-watt compact continuous bicolor LED light. Right away, what attracted me to this light was how compact it was. It's fairly light too, using a combination of metal for the bulk of the casing and quality hard plastic on both ends, and it also comes with a metal swivel arm that you can rotate the light on, and it can attach securely to a C-stand. It comes standard with a cable to connect to mains. They sent me the wrong plug for my country, but that's okay because the real feature that drew me to this light is made possible with this optional accessory, the battery mount. You can probably see where this is going. Simply take the mount and screw it onto the side of the light, attach your Sony NPF batteries, connect the AC cable from the mount to the light. You now have yourself a compact, portable, continuous light. Look at the size of this thing. Now, if ever I wanted to go traveling or have any project outdoors that required some extra lighting, I wouldn't hesitate to take this with me because it is just so convenient when you don't need to work with power supplies and cables. They also sent me the pistol grip, which attaches to the swivel arm so you can just comfortably handhold the light. I can do it with one arm, but you'll probably need two if you have a modifier like a softbox attached. Now, one thing that this light doesn't have is a standard Bowens mount, but don't worry, there is an option to get the Bowens mount adapter which will solve that issue. I do want to say though that this adapter does feel a little on the cheap side being made with plastic, and when fitted onto the light, it doesn't feel as tight and secure as I would have hoped. It gets the job done though. My attraction to this product is of course solely for the portability aspect. The icing on the cake is that this light can be controlled remotely via your phone using the Weeylite app, which just works, unlike some other app made by a certain camera company. Overall, a solid option. 60 watt isn't the most powerful, however, you do get very consistent quality light output. The convenience of portability with the ability to be powered by batteries and easy wireless control. So if you like the sound of that and you think it would suit the kind of videos or photo work you will be doing, I'll include a link down below so you can check it out yourself. Thanks again to Viltrox for sending this over. Time to make a video. So for this demonstration, we'll be working here at my computer table. I've got all the things that I need laid out for a simple video, so nothing too fancy. I'm going to be shooting with the Fujifilm X-S10, of course, and the lens that's attached today is the Fujifilm 18-55 f2.8 to f4. In terms of lighting, I've got some substitute lights that I'm going to use, like this little small lamp for a little bit of light power, and also the BenQ LED lamp that's attached to my monitor, which can give some nice overhead lighting. But the main light that I'll be using, of course, is the one that I mentioned before. This is the Weeylite Ninja 200, and if I move over here, just over here, it is right next to me. So it's very, very close to the computer table. And what I was mentioning before about the wireless control is, here's the mobile app, as you can see, and there's a power button on the top left-hand corner. If I press it, boom, the light turns on. So one of the great things about this light, as I mentioned before, is the wireless capabilities, and this is so much of a time saver. I don't have to walk behind the light and switch it on and off from there. So I'm going to be utilizing that later on in the shoot, but just know that the light is off to the side and it will be lighting a portion of the video. Now for this demonstration, I'll be shooting in black and white, mainly because I've got all these lighting situations set up. I've also got the room light, which is kind of a warm white, and then I've got the LED lamp, which is kind of cool white. And so all these different colored lights is going to mess up the white balance a lot. So the only solution to that is shooting in black and white. It's easy, it's simple and effective, so we're going to go with that. So I mentioned before that I'll be showing you guys the different shooting modes aside from manual mode. So let's go over that. First up, we've got the full program auto, which will basically allow the camera to record everything, and it will dictate the correct exposure depending on where your focus box is focused on. So as you can see right now in this scene, the camera is reading an ISO of 500, an aperture of 2.8, and a shutter speed of 25th of a second in order to properly expose this bottle right here. My focus box is like right here on this bottle. However, if I move this camera and focus on the screen here, immediately you can see that the scene has gotten a little bit dimmer. The screen has gotten dimmer than before. Right now I'm reading a shutter speed of 100, an aperture of f2.8, and an ISO of 250. And let's say if I move down here to the glass, again the ISO shifts. I'm reading 1/25 of a second, f2.8 at ISO 2000. And so it's constantly changing, and it's trying its best to maintain correct exposure at all times, right? So technically, if I'm moving across the scene like this slowly, there shouldn't be too much of a drastic shift in color, and it'll look natural-ish, right? And that's the beauty of Program Auto. Obviously, it's useful in certain situations. If you don't want to manually change the exposure, let's say you're vlogging and you're walking from a sunny place to a dark place, you really don't have time to fiddle around with your exposure settings. So Program Auto will be pretty cool for that. The only downside is you can't control the shutter speed. And if you want to maintain that, say, cinematic look or 30 frames per second, that's going to be a little of a challenge, especially when you're just basically letting your camera take full control. Now we're going to take a look at shutter priority. So now I'm in shutter priority. I can change the shutter speed to whatever value I want. However, keep in mind that the minimum shutter speed that I can shoot at is only going to be as low as the frame per second that you have for your video. So I'm shooting at 4K 24 frames per second, which means my shutter speed can only go as low as 1/24 of a second. However, I can increase the shutter speed to however high I want. So when I increase the shutter speed, if you know the exposure triangle, as you increase the shutter speed, then your scene is going to get darker. So in order to compensate for that, the ISO is going to increase, right? When the ISO increases, it'll make the scene brighter. So if I increase my shutter speed to say, I don't know, 1/100, then the ISO will move up to, ISO 1000 to compensate. And as I keep increasing to, say, shutter speed of 1/200, then the ISO will go up to 2500 in this case, right? And you can start to see banding because the shutter speed is too fast for the room lights frequency and whatnot. So that's shutter speed priority. Finally, we're going to take a look at aperture priority. So I'm going to switch it over to aperture priority and hit record. All right, so in aperture priority, I am at f2.8 right now, and the camera is exposing this bottle as 1/25 of a second and ISO 400. Now, if I increase the aperture value to say f5.6, in order to compensate, the camera was like, okay, I'm going to change it to ISO 2000. Okay, so it works the same way. As I'm changing the aperture, the ISO changes most of the time. If I move to a brighter scene, like so, you can see that the shutter speed also changes to 1/50th of a second, and the ISO is at 500. And the aperture right now is at f8. Okay, so for the second part of the demonstration, I'll quickly show you guys one of the features that I didn't really address in the previous part, which is full HD high-speed recording. I'm going to be shooting that same shot that I did at the start of the video of me pouring the coffee into the cup, and I'll just show you guys how it works with the slow motion feature on this camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prop this camera up on a tripod and then set it on the desk. That allows me to free my hand up so I can, pour the jug of water into the cup. So let me break down the thinking process of shooting a slow-mo shot. The Fujifilm X-S10 can shoot slow-mo, but when you do shoot slow-mo, you're going down to full HD and not 4K. Keep that in mind. You have the option to choose between 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second, right? And if you're shooting your entire video at 24 frames per second, then it makes sense to be shooting slow-mo at 24 frames per second as well. I'm going to go into the menu, and first of all, I'm going to change the shooting mode to manual. This will give me full control of the scene so I can get that perfect slow motion shot. Second of all, I'm going to go down and I'm going to switch on Full HD high-speed recording. So I'm going to turn that to on. I'm going to choose 24 frames per second as the base frame rate. And then for slow motion, I'm going to choose 120p. And you can see it down below. If you're shooting 120 frames per second at 24 frames, then you're going to get a slow motion of 5 times. So take that in mind when you're shooting that. And I'll notice as soon as I change it to 120 frames per second, the minimum shutter speed that I can shoot at becomes 1/20th of a second. You can't go any lower than that, because if you go any lower, you won't be able to shoot 120 frames per second, right? Logically. You'll also notice that the camera has applied a little bit of a crop to the footage, and that's naturally what happens when you start shooting in slow motion, right? For this X-S10, which is unavoidable, which is unfortunate, but that's just how it is. So taking a look at the scene right now, I'm reading out the specs. So I've got shutter speed at 1/20th of a second. I've got my aperture at f2.8. I've got my ISO at 4000. So the ISO is a little bit high for my liking. I'm going to switch it to ISO 160. So let me just show you guys what happens, right? I'm going to hit record and I'm going to change my ISO to 160. Now you can immediately see that the scene is really, really dark. And of course, we don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to brighten up the scene, basically. So the first way to light up the scene is using the main light, the Weeylite. So I'm going to turn on the Weeylite Ninja 200 using the app. Boom, like that. And as you can see, the scene has gotten a little bit brighter, but it's nowhere near as bright as I would like it to be. So the second light that I'm going to turn on is going to be the BenQ LED. I'm going to light that. The camera is metering -1 stop underexposed for this scene. So I want to get it to proper exposure. Final one, I'm going to light this scene up with this little lamp. I'm just going to point it directly in front here, just out of the scene. Okay, so the best I can do is -2/3 of a stop underexposed, but that's fine. Now, the final thing before I shoot this slow motion is I'm going to make sure that the focus is correct, that I'm focusing on the water being poured into the glass, and that's the most important part, right? You want to make sure that the focus is on the subject that matters the most. So in order to do that, and in order to get that, to nail that focus, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to manual shooting mode. Before I had the focus mode set to AF continuous, but now I'm going to change it to manual focus. So now I've changed it to manual focus. What I'm going to do is I'm going to literally put my finger right here in front of the cup, and I'm going to focus on my finger. Try and get the proper focus on my finger. So I'm going to say about here, and that's where the focus is. All right, so once I've got everything in place, now is when I would start doing the actual footage. So I'm going to put my hand over the cup like this, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to be pouring into exactly where my finger was before. I'm going to aim the water down to exactly where my finger was before, and theoretically it should focus on the water being poured in. So I'm going to do that, and let's see how it turns out.
So hopefully, if you are new to the X-S10 system, or you are thinking of buying a camera that can take both amazing stills and videos, you have gained new knowledge and new confidence in the X-S10. It's honestly one of the best bang for buck APS-C video capable cameras on the market right now. Alright, hope you guys enjoy this video. Like, comment and subscribe if you want to see more, and until next time.